is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you for your continued support and continuing to view my videos, even in the dull times in the NFL offseason. Of course, this isn't a normal offseason. Normally, like I've said in my previous videos, I'd be doing other sports, but there's not much to talk about. But I try to give you guys as much Giants content as I possibly can. So thank you guys for your love and support. And even a bigger thank you to a lot of you guys that came over and subscribed to my new movie channel, which I'll be working on my second podcast today. Really looking forward to that. And I'll probably do my first live stream with my brother tomorrow. So if you guys have any interest in that, thank you guys for joining on the Entertainer Talking Movies. I really appreciate the support that you guys always show me. I like to always show that as much as I can and tell you guys that you're the best supporters on YouTube. But in this video, I kind of wanted to dive into some topics that I saw when I woke up this morning regarding the New York Giants and the NFL in general, as there's not a lot of news, but I thought there was some pretty interesting stuff that came in. And obviously, the first thing that I'm going to dive into is the schedule change regarding the preseason and how I think that'll affect the New York Giants. I'm also going to talk about an interview that Andrew Thomas had on, I think, the Big Blue podcast on Giants.com with Paul Dottino with the guy that's been prepping him for the regular season. I believe his name is Fournette. He's a former offensive lineman that's been prepping Andrew Thomas, and he had a lot of very nice things to say about Thomas and how he's been preparing this offseason during the pandemic. But I'm going to start with the preseason being cut short. And obviously, this is a big storyline right now, and a lot of fans are going to be up in arms. They're going to be in panic due to the fact that now you've cut the Hall of Fame game, and now every team, instead of playing 4 preseason games, will be playing 2. And people are going to start to think, well, the NFL is starting to scale back. When are they going to cut into the regular season? Will we have a season at all? And, obviously nobody has the answer at this point in time. Things can change overnight, right? We've seen another spike in the pandemic, and hopefully it does not affect the NFL regular season. At this point in time, it looks as if the NFL is trying to do everything they can to play, along with all the other major sports, but we won't know until we get closer to the season. And of course, training camp is supposed to start on July 28th, which is why I never thought it was feasible if the NFL thought that they were going to start the regular season on time, which of course begins beginning of September, to have a full preseason, because you didn't have any mandatory minicamps, you didn't have OTAs, you don't have a normal offseason, and you're throwing these guys into the fire July 28th. You don't know if all these guys are going to be able to show up on time, because now you have travel restrictions and everything else. I believe Jersey put those on, so it's going to be harder for them to report to the facility. So there's a lot of challenges that have gone into place, not to mention these guys are not going to be in the same shape that they normally would be in, being that they were not able to have their normal offseason preparation. Of course, we've seen a lot of hard work, which I want to continue to say is very encouraging for the New York Giants football team. There was a video that came out on Evan Ingram, who looked very spry, looked good to go. I think he's 100%. The same can be said for Jabril Peppers, who looks to be working hard. Daniel Jones, I want to continue to express, has looked great. I'm going to talk about some of the things about Andrew Thomas and what was said about him in the interview on Big Blue, which, more encouraging things. We've heard things about David Mayo, DeAndre Baker. Obviously, he's dealing with what he's dealing with, but videos have come out on him. He's looked like he's been working hard. So there's a lot of encouraging things regarding the New York Giants players, as well as, of course, Saquon Barkley, who's always working. You don't have a body like that unless you're putting the work in. So obviously they're doing as much as they can, but it doesn't simulate a regular off season. And the fact that you're bringing in a completely new offense and defense, yes, will it affect the New York Giants? Of course. In the regular season, of course, it'll affect everybody. Every team's only going to play 2 games. Every team is not going to have a normal offseason, but the fact that the New York Giants have, new systems to implement in a second-year quarterback trying to learn that system, there's only so much you could do in virtual meetings and, training with your quarterback coach at a football field. It doesn't develop chemistry with your wide receivers. And if there's only 2 preseason games, well, the Giants and every team in the league has to make the most out of those opportunities. Normally in the preseason, the first game you play maybe a drive, maybe 2 with the starters, specifically at the quarterback spot. The second game, maybe you get a quarter and a half. The third game, you play 3 quarters or so. And the fourth game, the starters don't usually play. Well, this year, being that there's only 2 preseason games, I would expect the New York Giants to try to get as much reps as they can with the starters as they try to develop chemistry. But by the same token, you have to get an eye on some of the players that are, back of the end, back of the roster type players that are trying to compete and make this football team, because you need a decent evaluation. So it'll be interesting to see how the New York Giants adapt and how they go about orchestrating the playing time during these 2 preseason games, but I think Daniel Jones needs as much experience and as much exposure as he can get in this new offense before you start the regular season and you go up against some of those really tough opponents. So that was an interesting storyline, and we'll see how the New York Giants adapt to the shortened preseason. But I wanted to jump into some of the quotes regarding Andrew Thomas that was on the Big Blue Kickoff Live podcast, and some of the things that was said about him from Keenan Fournette, who's a former offensive lineman who's now been prepping Andrew Thomas this entire offseason. So let's jump right into it. The first quote I wanted to show you guys that Fournette said on the show was, "I see tremendous improvement in him." Let's be clear about this. Andrew is a very smart football player. One thing that I've noticed with him is that when I show him something on film, I correct it right there on the field, and he'll see it, and he'll make the correction right then. There's been some times when he's blown me away when I say, "Hey, look, here, maybe you want to flare your elbows back as much because it's taking too much time. Let's keep them nice and tight." Whatever the situation is, as soon as we do the next rep, he corrects it and fixes it. He's very smart and will correct it. He's a coach's dream. He's a coach's pleasure. I know the Giants will be very happy with him when they get him coming up this fall. I'm trying to get him ready for Sunday, and he's very coachable, very smart, and he's trying to work it. And again, that has been a common theme with all the players. You know, we've talked about Darnay Holmes, we've talked about Xavier McKinney, and Andrew Thomas is no different. Seems to be the type of player that wants to be taught, something that Joe Judge has expressed he wants in these coaches. He wants good teachers. Next thing we're going to bring up is this. Talking about on his technique. I believe it will be effective for him because you can't come out and show guys the same thing, Fournette said. You've got to give them some different looks. Sort of like when you watch and see prize fighters get in the ring. They'll come out one way, and then the next round they're showing something else just to keep you off balance. You've got to give those guys different looks, like hands high or inside, hand up, a little bit higher, or setting a guy and punching his outside shoulder and coming back with the inside hand. Kind of like a 1-2 combo. And then, a couple more quotes I wanted to pull up for you guys. Talking about the off-season program and, the virtual meetings and everything else. I think it's good and bad, Fournette said, of the format. The good part is that was what he was going to do anyway. They were going to be in a meeting room watching tape on the dry erase board anyway. He'd have to go home and study on his own at night before he goes to sleep. And I think the other good part about it is that if he was at the facility, then they'd be out on the field trying to work it. So at least he can kind of save his body a little bit. Going into the season, he'll be fresher, but also, too, he's coming to dash and working on the field, and we're looking at his tablet, and we're going through some of the drills that Giants offensive line coach Mark Colombo and assistant offensive line coach Ben Wilkerson want them to work on, and we're doing those. And also, too, I'm adding some things in because there's a lot of stuff that I watch and I can see up close that I'll be like, hey, you know what? We need to work on this a little bit. More because he might be sliding back into the old habit, or hey, let's do this drill just because he's gotten better and we can add something to it. He's far past that point of where I have to do a whole lot of fundamentals, but I still want to stay on his fundamentals. Honestly, in my opinion, from working with him, he can go left to right easy. Talking about the versatility in Andrew Thomas's game, Fournette said, he can be playing left tackle week 1, injury happens, hey Andrew, we need you to play right tackle this week. He can make that transition real easy because I have him working both sides. I have him cross-training both sides. He's just good at both of them. He knows how to hold his hands on either side. He can from either side. I don't see him not playing either side, which is something that Joe Judge has talked about this entire offseason in terms of versatility, and I'm not too surprised by that, being that Andrew Thomas has played the right tackle well at college at Georgia. So, really good stuff there. He then went on to talk about a story about Andrew Thomas's work ethic that I'm not going to get into because I gave you guys enough quotes. But I just wanted to get some of that up because when I read it, I was very encouraged by it. Getting to hear about Andrew Thomas, the work he's been putting in this entire offseason, and he continues to fit the theme of this New York Giants draft class, which is intelligence and strong work ethic, which is what Fournette talked about and portrayed regarding Andrew Thomas, who I think will be the starting left tackle for the New York Giants come week 1, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out during training camp between him and, of course, Nate Solder. It'll be interesting, with the shortened offseason, how it all works out, not just at that position, but, obviously you're going to have a lot of other camp battles, but to me, that is the biggest storyline going in, being that Andrew Thomas was the number 4 overall pick and our most important rookie, if we're being completely honest, a future blindside protector for Daniel Jones. And to hear how intelligent he is, how he absorbs everything like a sponge, how quick of a learner he is, how much he wants to learn, should encourage New York Giants fans. I don't remember hearing things about that with Eric Flowers. He seems to be a much better prospect, the type of guy who has the will to be great, which is exactly what I had to say about Xavier McKinney when going over a couple of articles the other day. So I'm really encouraged by Andrew Thomas. I can't wait to see him out on the football field. As far as the shortened offseason goes, well, I'm not too surprised by it because of the pandemic, and neither should you. I wouldn't panic just yet. We'll have to wait and see what the NFL decides to do and how this virus acts over the next couple of weeks. But, right as of now, I still think there'll be a football season. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.